Okay, good. So welcome everybody to our panel. Today we're going to be talking a little bit, or during this hour, about career success. In particular, we're talking about thinking critically about career success and why it's important to do so. I should say at the outset also that Enrique will be presenting later, and myself are CUNY Career Success Fellows. And we have a year in which to do some stuff around career success, engage students in it, engage our faculty. And so this is the first part of trying to get people involved, thinking about it, exchanging ideas about what's possible, what we can do, and how we can improve our students' success going forward, not only in the classroom, but beyond. So let's talk a little bit about why we do career success, why it's needed. So career readiness provides a framework for addressing student learning goals, and also related curricular goals and outcomes. It's important to say also that CUNY sees student success as part of the chancellor's key goals, and one of his main outcomes, are student success. And it's also a major part in our new strategic plan. So what we're trying to do here is right in line with what the university itself is doing and what, they want us to be engaged with. When we talk about career readiness, we're actually, I can't see, I have to move this thing a little bit. We're proposing for faculty and students to think about career self-development. And what we mean by that is that they proactively develop ourselves through continual personal and professional learning, being aware of our strengths and weaknesses, navigating career opportunities, and networking to build relationships within our organization, within our school, and beyond. It might mean also engaging with alumni, for instance. It might be bringing in a new a speaker to showcase the career path in the field, the chosen field of study. And it's just getting students thinking, getting them aware of what they look like, what they could be in the field. And then it's getting faculty to think about how we could facilitate students' development, students' self-reflection, students thinking critically about what career they see themselves doing, what the possibilities are, and how they position themselves to do so. So when we talk about career readiness and facilitating career readiness, we're actually looking at things like showing an awareness of our strengths and weaknesses, what areas we need to develop, identifying areas for continual growth. So we're talking about learning also beyond the classroom. So it's not just 4 years and we're done. It's engaging students so they themselves can be proactive in how they engage with their chosen career path. Developing plans and goals for the future. So this could be something that students actually do in the classroom. We're going to look at maybe how we can lay it out a little bit and ask you what you think is the best way to approach it. We're also talking about students and piquing students' interest so that they display curiosity, seek out opportunities of learning, experiential learning, internships, whatever. And they're establishing, maintaining, and leveraging relationships. So it's not just about sitting around a desk and actually, browsing jobs and applying. It's actually deliberately doing things that will facilitate you getting that first opportunity and then building on it as we go forward, right? So it's the engagement that we're, looking at also. So a quick question that we posed here is, how best can we integrate career readiness into classes at all 4 years or all 4 year levels for students? So these are just talking points for us, but we'd love to engage with you to see how best we can do it. So we're thinking at the 100 level, like the introductory classes, that we introduce students broadly to the field. We bring in speakers, we have students reflect on how they see themselves in the field. So engaging, initial engagement at the early levels of our program. At the 200 level, students start developing their resumes and their cover letters, their LinkedIn profile, handshake. They seek out internships and they start developing a portfolio of their best works. And some of this could be done through gen ed classes, but a lot of it is going to be done through the area of study. So if you're in criminal justice, it's those core courses that you need to take, right? So a lot of it could be done there. Year 3, we're building. So this is a gradual progression that we're doing. We start small, let's say, right? And then we build over time. So by year 3, 300 level classes, students are actively engaged in internships, and we're actually plugging these things in our syllabi, right? One of the things I think also, but I'm not sure how we can do it, you can tell me, is that we develop an outcome, a learning outcome, right? And we measure it. So in my class, for instance, one of the things I do in the early classes, I think week 2, we start doing that introduction. And this is a 101 class. The week 2, we start with the introduction. I bring in a career person, some HR, somebody from HR. I also bring in the tech person, the LinkedIn person, doing the profile online. And then I actually, at the end of the class, have them submit a resume. They're submitting a career trajectory over 10 years. It will change, I know, but it gets students to think, what could I do here? How do I see myself? What are the obstacles I could face? What are the requirements for this? How do I move from point A to point B to point C to the point where I'm ready for this career, right? So I'm actually measuring it at the end. And I think if we don't measure it, then things might get lost. I'm not sure, right? But in doing that, it's reinforced. And professors will, actually do it because they're measuring it. And then by year 4, we're doing interview prep, mock interviews. We're doing a strategy for job searches. We're encouraging students to attend job fairs. John Jay has some really good job fairs going on where the place is packed and people are coming in. And then they also have a portfolio ready of their best works to showcase, right? So those are just some ideas, right? And they're not all the ideas, but that's the general gist of what we're thinking about, is that we develop skills from early as when students enter. And so by the time they leave over 4 years, we have covered most of the bases to help them to launch from there and put them in a position where they themselves now are doing the advocacy for themselves, they're doing the positioning, they're doing the networking, they're doing all of these things. So I'm going to stop here for now, but the last thing that I have, and we'll come back to after the other 2 presenters, is possibly creating an assignment that we can actually start in our classes for this fall. It's a small assignment, but we can build as we go along. So I'll stop here and hand over to Enrique, who will continue. But guys, keep thinking about how you could actually develop an assignment for your class. Thank you.
Well, Denise, thank you very much. Allow me just here a minute to share my screen. And as Denise said, I like Denise. I'm a CUNY Career Success Fellow, and I'm very interested in, right, helping our students develop skills and competencies that are gonna help them not only in our, in the classroom, um, but uh, to have a successful career. So I do have a question for Denise before I begin. Can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Denise, do you want
Yes.
people to suggest? Thank you very much. Do you want people to rather suggest something now, or you want to hold up until the end? In terms of your very interesting question about an assignment.
I think I'll wait until the end just to give you and Joy enough time to go through
Perfect.
your presentations.
Perfect.
And then people will be thinking as you do.
Okay,
Thank you,
perfect.
Enrique.
No, thank you. So, NACE recognizes, right, certain, certain career success competencies, and one of them is will not be a surprise to any of you, is critical thinking. Yeah, and basically, right, critical thinking, right, is widely recognized in education and in terms of NACE career readiness competence as having at least three features, right? One, it's done for the purpose of making up one's mind about what to believe or to do. Two, the person engaging in the thinking is trying to fulfill standards of adequacy and accuracy appropriate to the thinking. And three, the thinking fulfills the relevant standards to, some threshold, right? The reason why I am concentrating on arguments from analogy, and incidentally, please interrupt me at any point in my talk, okay? If you have questions, comments, or objections. The reason is that the argument from analogy is probably the most widely used argument. We use it all the time in our everyday lives, in academia, at work. And I'm very interested in things that students are not usually taught in college in the United States, right? So we teach them literacy and numeracy, but we don't teach them how to think, right? And that's the philosopher's job, right? To explain to students that thought has a structure, and basically, right, my lifetime commitment is to help students avoid crimes against logic, right? Bad thinking. Look at Plato's take on arguments from analogy. It says arguments that make their point by means of similarities, Plato said, are impostors, and unless you are on your guard, right, against them, will quite readily, he said, deceive you. Look at Freud's take on arguments from analogies. Analogies decide nothing that is true, but they can make one feel more at home. So the idea here is that arguments from analogy declare, right, that because two items are the same in one respect, they are the same in another. And as Freud rightly notes, right, they can make you feel at home, right? And for that reason, they can be particularly deceptive. Okay, I'm just going to focus on the argument of analogy, and I would like to ask one of our participants to please read. Dustin, do you mind reading this example?
Sure. During World War I, the Socialist Party distributed leaflets to recent draftees, urging them to oppose the draft. The draft, they contended, violated the constitutional amendment against involuntary servitude. Oliver Wendell Holmes, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, argued that they did not have the right to circulate the leaflets during wartime. The right to free speech, he asserted, would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. Since in both cases, the words used create a clear and present danger, he concluded, the right to free speech did not protect the socialists in expressing ideas that might harm the war effort.
Thank you very much. Right. So look how the argument begins with something familiar, right? Of course, we don't have the right to falsely shout fire in the theater, right? And invites us to conclude the same about something less familiar, right? Under certain circumstances, we don't even have the right to explain to others our interpretation of the US Constitution. Holmes is often quoted as calling it a crowded theater. He didn't, though it was probably what he had in mind. Okay? So arguments from analogy are almost always enticing because by their very nature, they use two well-known quick and dirty shortcuts in reasoning, right? By beginning with the familiar, they exploit our dependence on the vividness shortcut, right? And by presenting similarities between the familiar and the unfamiliar, they take advantage of our dependence on the similarity shortcut. Right? So they're basically custom made for the way our minds naturally operate. And this makes us especially susceptible to them and heightens, right, the importance of being able to evaluate them effectively. If you're wondering what percentage of use of arguments from analogy commit crimes against logic, I have it around 82%, right? Just pick up the New York Times, watch CNN, not to mention Fox News, and many writings in academia, and most of the time, people get them wrong, okay? So what's the correct form of the arguments from analogy? I'm going to skip this. I'm going to go through this very quickly, but not every time that people are using an analogy, right, are making an argument, right? So if Michael doesn't mind, can I ask you, Michael, to read this Azel Moore paragraph? Or Alejandro?
Sure, I can read this.
Thank you, Alejandro.
So just read what's on the slide.
Yes, please.
Okay, analogies are often used merely for rhetorical effect. Azel Moore of the Philadelphia Inquirer, for example, writes, writing editorials is a lot like wearing a navy blue suit and standing in a rainstorm on a cold day and wetting your pants. It may give you a warm feeling for a minute, but no one else is going to notice.
Right? So here, Moore is not trying to establish any conclusions, right? He simply makes a note, right, of it. So just a warning, right? Don't jump, right, to the conclusion that an analogy necessarily introduces an argument unless, right, there is, right, a conclusion, right? You have, for an argument, obviously, we need premises and we need a conclusion. Okay. On the other hand, when there is an argument from analogy, right, as in the free speech argument, it can typically be clarified according to the following form, right? Okay, so, we read this as A is F and G, B is F, therefore the conclusion B is G, right? Let me translate this to English. So A and B are things. So A is a thing that has properties or characteristics F and G. B is a thing that has characteristic or property F. And the conclusion is that B is also G. Okay. So let me say a bit more about the names that we give to this, to components of arguments from analogy. So again, A and B are name letters, right? And we call this the analogs, right? The two things or classes of things that are said to be analogs. A, we call the basic analog. This is the one that we are presumed to be very familiar with. In the free speech argument, A is falsely shouting fire in a crowded theater, right? B, we call the inferred analog, right? Is the thing in question the one that argument draws a conclusion about? And in the free speech argument, it is expressing ideas that might harm the warrior. Okay. I'm going to keep, I keep putting there the formal fashion of the argument so that, you have it in mind. So as I was saying earlier, F and G are property letters, right? And we call F the basic similarity, right? The property that the two analogs share, presumably without controversy. In the free speech argument, the basic similarity is that they create a clear and present danger. And G, we call the inferred similarity, right? The property that the inferred analog is purported to have on the grounds that the basic analog has is not protected by the right to free speech, right? Is the inferred similarity in the free speech argument. So here's one way to clarify the argument more formally, right? Yeah. Who would like to read this for us, please? Joseph, any chance that you would like to read this for us?
I'm so sorry. Where I'm at is really the background noise is bothering me. I'm fighting just to hear the presentation.
Don't worry, Joseph. Thank you.
So sorry.
Dustin, can I talk to you again?
Sure.
Thank you,
Here's
buddy.
one good way to clarify the argument. 1, falsely shouting fire in a theater creates a clear and present danger and is not protected by the right to free speech. 2, expressing the ideas that might harm the war effort creates a clear and present danger. Therefore, C, expressing ideas that might harm the war effort is not protected by the right to free speech.
Right. And there, right, you can see, right, the beauty, right, of the correct form, right, of the argument from analogy. Okay. Now, there are variations, right, for the argument. So basically, A doesn't have to be one thing; it could be two things, right? Yeah. So there can be more items, right? So an example would be manatees must be mammals, since whales and dolphins, like manatees, are sea creatures that give live birth, and whales and dolphins are definitely mammals, right? So in this case, the basic analog, A, is whales and dolphins, right? Not just one thing. And the same goes for the properties or characteristics, right? The inferred similarity may include more than one property, right? As in this example, right? Manatees must be mammals, since whales, like manatees, are sea creatures that give live birth, and that nourish their young on the mother's milk, and whales are definitely mammals, right? So here, the basic similarity, the content, right? The content of F is the content of F is several characteristics, right? Creatures that live, that give creatures, that give live birth and nourish their young on their mother's milk. So why, you can imagine that in a logic course, right, a student might say, like, well, why are you teaching me this, right? Why am I here, right? Yeah. And one of the reasons why students fail to graduate from CUNY and college in general, the first one is money, right? Lack of money, lack of resources. But the second one is why am I here, right? Why is Dustin and and Denise and so on, why why do they think that this is important, right? That I learn what they have to teach me, right? And you can see that if you take like 17 minutes, right, out of a semester and just do, for example, the argument from analogy, right? You can convince students that one, right, this is extremely useful, not only for their success in your class, but also for success in life and success in their, right, in their careers. And of course, you don't have to use whales and manatees and stuff like that, right? You can use, arguments from sociology, from psychology, from whatever field, right, that you happen to be teaching, right? But the hack, right, is usually straightforward, right? It's the easiest thing is to begin by identifying the analogs, right? The two items that the arguer is comparing. And then insert the one that is not in question, right? The familiar one into the A position as the basic analog. And then the one that is in question into the B position as the inferred analog. And then insert the basic similarity, right? The property the two analogs uncontroversially share into both premises as F. And finally, insert the inferred similarity, right? Into the first premise and the conclusion as G. Okay. Now, here's another note of warning. Arguments from analogy are sometimes enthymemes, right? An enthymeme is an argument where one of the premises is implicit, okay? So when there is an implicit statement, it's usually the second premise, the one that establishes the basic similarity. And this is because arguers often assume, rightly, right, that the similarity between the two analogs is so obvious that it goes without saying, right? So, here's an example. Suppose I say to a friend of mine whose son is about to enter first grade, since John behaves respectfully towards his parents, he will surely treat his teachers with respect. The basic analog is John's parents, right? The inferred analog is John's teachers, right? And the inferred similarity is are treated with respect by John. But what is the basic similarity, right? And we must identify a relevant trait, right, that parents and teachers have in common, namely that they are authority figures. And in fact, my warning, it's important because, in fact, most arguments from analogy, the second premise tends to be implicit. Yeah. However, right, if we use the formal form of the argument from analogy, we can clarify it, right, and we can shed light on it. So typically, right, we use the brackets to indicate premise 2, which is implicit. Yeah. But we also, is very important, must apply to premise 1 the part about, right, authority figures. Right. So premise 1, John's parents are authority figures to him and are treated with respect by him. The implicit premise 2, John's teachers will be authority figures to him, and therefore the conclusion, John's teachers will be treated with respect by him. Yeah. So again, right, the guideline is that structure arguments from analogy, you should structure arguments from analogy when it would be loyal to do so, right? And we need to identify, again, 4 things, right? The basic and the inferred analog, and the basic and the inferred similarities, right? And then we insert them each into its proper place in the form, right? Okay. And just remember that the second premise can be implicit. Okay. Now, here's a sample exercise that we all can do together. Yeah. Joy, do you mind reading this sample exercise, please?
Sample exercise. Expressions of shock and sadness come from other coaches. Oh, can't see.
Sorry.
Oh.
Sorry. My bad.
Expressions of shock and sadness came from other coaches and administrators following the announcement by Tulane President Iman Kelly that the school planned to drop its basketball program in the wake of the alleged gambling scheme and newly discovered NCAA violations. Coach Gene Killingsworth of TCU said, "I think they should deal with the problem, not do away with it. If they had something like that happen in the English department, would they do away with that? I feel like they should have tried to solve their problems." Associated Press.
Thank you very much. So, how do we put this in formal fashion so that we can make sure that it is an argument from analogy? So basically, what is your A? What is your B? What is your F? What is your G? Anyone? Look at what the coach is arguing, right? The thing in quotes. So what are the two things that are being said that they are similar?
Alejandro has his hand up.
Go ahead, Alejandro. Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, I just was curious what I missed the initial question. I mean, it just seems like a pretty big false equivalency. They're saying that the English department is the same as the NCAA.
They're saying that the English department, right, is the same as basketball, right?
Right.
Right. Good. My my original question, Alejandro, is how do we set this in formal fashion, right? Using, let me go back to your right, what's there on the bottom, right? So that we can see that this is in effect an argument for analogy. Now, I think that you're spot on that you're saying, hey, there's a crime against logic being committed here, right? But before we evaluate, right, the validity, right, and the soundness of the argument, we need to ascertain whether it's an argument, right, from analogy, right? So Alejandro, you're right that your A, right, is going to be, right, the English department, right? The B is going to be basketball, right? And what is the basic similarity between the two, according to the coach?
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
We need to have time for the next presenter. I'm sorry.
Perfect. No. Thank you. You're an excellent. So right, there's the answer to our exercise. Without further ado, thank you very much. And that's it.
Joy, you're up.
You're muted, Joe.
Okay.
Still muted, Joy.
Oh,
Ah, thank you.
yes, my name is Joy Dunkley. I'm one of the librarians who work out of the library here. While I'm bringing up my screen, and I am going to, for the sake of time, I'm not going to be talking about, I won't cover everything on my screen, I'm trying to blur my background. Oh, goodness, I should have changed it. I won't be going through everything on my screen. But what I'm going to be talking about today is how the library can contribute to career success of Gen Z student. And when we think of library, we talk about information literacy. I won't go through everything as I say. And one of the main things is that for the students to be able to take the information that they learn out into the real world, they have to understand the role that the libraries play and the fact that especially it will help them we're thinking about being literate. Information literacy is basically being able to be literate in the field of information or to be educated in the field of information. So which is a skill that will help them to navigate more quickly and skillfully through the maze of what is valid, what is credible, versus what isn't in the real world. What's the real world? It's unpredictable world behind school or academic environment. When students realize that, it's a real world out there. And in colleges, the outcome are predetermined. There's a lot of pressure, but it's a realistic and neat and orderly setting where the assignment is given, you're told what the outcomes are, what is required of you. When their need for them to be able to be information literate is that when they go out into the real world, they should be able, there are things different out there. What is required in the workplace is being dictated to them. And if they don't give the correct information, they will be held responsible. They'll show their lack of knowledge. And the fact is that with the explosion of information, access to it, it is imperative that students are aware what is going on out there and how to be able to seek, locate, and define information. Next, information literacy and critical skills. Critical skills is extremely important. Information literacy and critical skills are considered closely related. They're cousins. They're connected. Critical thinking connects to information literacy as two parts of the same whole. And we know that critical thinking is a process of examining potential information sources in an objective and analytic manner. And this is especially important when they're using web sources, because if they're not able to do that, there are many disadvantages of being information literate. They won't be prepared for the workplace. They're unable to keep up with the latest development in the field. They won't be able to communicate well, which means information literacy is a transferable skill, and they're going to be less competent among other disadvantages. So the goal in college or John Jay is to educate a diverse and qualified student population. We want them to become responsible professionals who can commit to lifelong learning. And lifelong learning is basically, we call it, is the ability to learn to learn. It's an ongoing lifelong process. You're always learning. But if we only took the skills that we learn in our undergraduate years, we would be way behind. Things are changing. There's a rise of commercial internet, the explosion of the social media. People are bombarded with information 24/7. And if we can let our students understand that they have to evolve with the constant change in order to remain relevant and successful. And if we as faculty think of how long ago we left school, but we have to keep up with it. And when we learn to learn, we can become successful lifelong learning, especially when it comes to the field of information literacy. And because it's a jungle out there. And if one has that ability to successfully navigate through it, it all depends on upon how literate you're about the information, how capable you are to critically analyze information and takes it into the work field. Doesn't matter what their career is, they have to know how to define, find, evaluate, organize, and communicate information. They have to be able to know how capable you are in analyzing the information, what is genuine, what is credible, what is authoritative, what is accurate, what is real, and what is not. So how do they stay successful? One of the questions we have to ask our Gen Z student in order to let them realize the importance of staying in college, importance of incorporating the library and information literacy. How do you stay successful in such a rapidly changing information? How do you keep from being overrun by your competitors on the field? How do you determine that you're the one who get the promotion or not being overlooked? By becoming a lifelong learner, you can acquire the skill to learn that you always know how to learn. And that's what information literacy is. You learn how to find this information. You're able to adapt and incorporate different forms of information and information delivery as your career and the information continues to evolve. We're living in a time in which we call a knowledge-based economy. And basically, knowledge base is, in a nutshell, it's an economic system in which the production of goods and services is based on knowledge and/or activities that contribute to a rapid pace of advancement in technical and scientific innovation. It's a situation in which a person is more likely to be successful the more they can know and utilize knowledge and information into a value or an income. So those who can best convert information into knowledge of monetary value have the chance of succeeding. So this we have to emphasize to our students. And here's the meat of the matter. And I know I'm going through quickly. So we have a lot of resources in the library that the students can utilize and you as faculty can introduce them to. And I'm going to go to the library's LibGuides where we can look at library resources, web resources, internship sources, exam and study guides, and John Jay and Your Career. So it takes us to the library website here, and this is what we call a LibGuides. This LibGuide was prepared specifically for career success. So the first thing you see is like library resources. We list a number of resources there, and they're mostly printed books listed here as a guide. Then besides that, we have web resources. We have linked to all of these, Bureau of Justice Statistics, Bureau of Justice, and so forth. And they're all here, criminal justice website, Career One Stop. So there's a lot of information here. And not just, we don't just concentrate on criminal justice. We have links to career, general career, and job information sites. So there's a lot here. ONET Online Occupation Outlook, which is really good. And there's a police and detective occupation outlook handbook, secret services career. So there's a lot here, interview with a police sergeant. So it's wide and varied. Then we do have discussion blogs over here. And I'm rushing through internship sources. We do provide links to different areas, internship, how to get internship through John Jay. Take you to the Center for Career and Professional Development, virtual global internship. And then we have a list of websites that offers internship. So we do have a lot of it, and we have books. We pull a few of our books here with the link here, and some of them are ebooks, which are very good. And this is a LibGuide, which was prepared by one of our librarians. Then we provide exam study guides. So we do have a lot of study guides, website, and link to the website and library resources, which are along here that can help them with preparing for exams. We have a list of books down here, whole lot of information. Then we have down here a discussion board. So there's a lot of information that we do provide here that can assist them. Then the last link is John Jay and Your Career. So the center, again, we give a link to the Center for Career and Professional Development and the Career Service, the Facebook page, and their Twitter link. Then we present here some articles of interest as well, and some books of interest. So there's a wealth of information. And as usual, we say, don't hesitate to contact or visit the library for assistance in locating basic information that you need. And this LibGuides is created specifically, and the link is in the, it's going to be in the slides, where you can find a lot of information here that can assist you. And I'm sorry I went through quickly, but for the sake of time, we want to give you enough time for you to ask questions. Thank you.
All right. Cool.
Thank you, Joy. So we're going to maybe open up the questions shortly, but one of the things I wanted to do was to go back to the questions I asked earlier. And then I think maybe we could frame our discussion around that. So, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, 3 questions. I added one. And the reason why we're coming back to this question is because we want to hammer home the point that we have to be thinking critically about student career success or student success. Part of student success is career readiness. And we are encouraging folks here to integrate not only the logic as part of critical thinking, but the technology and the resources available in the library to kind of guide students along at the different levels, year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. So we have 3 questions to end. The first one is to create a career readiness learning outcome for your class. And this has to be appropriate for your class level. It's a 100 level class, then what's the outcome that you'd like to have there listed in your syllabus? Secondly, from that career readiness learning outcome, at the end of the class, students will be able to X, Y, and Z. Maybe be familiar with library resources around careers, it could be whatever. From that, we create an assignment that is suitable to the student's level. So if it's a level 1, it might be accessing the discussion board on the career readiness site in the library. I'm just throwing that out. It could be anything. And then the third question is give your reasoning for creating this assignment. Why did you create this particular assignment? Why was it appropriate for the class that you're actually presenting this in? So there's a 3-part question there, and we'll give you we have 3 minutes, 2 minutes to kind of quick and dirty jot something down, and then we can have a discussion. Is that okay? So whenever you're ready, just raise your hand and we'll call. What could a career readiness learning outcome be for your class? What's an assignment appropriate for that career level outcome, and what's the reasoning?
I'm happy to say something, but I rather hear other voices than my own. But if nobody is willing to speak, I can say something at the end to answer your great question. Thank you, Denise.
So don't be shy to raise your hand if you have a point, if you want to say something. We're all grappling with this, how best to do it, and I think your feedback will help to guide us. Dustin, please.
Yeah, I would say for me, just kind of like starting from the third question, I teach history. And I think a lot of times in like humanities courses, it's kind of you're teaching a lot of like really soft skills, which are going to eventually be useful for students, but you don't necessarily see the career readiness like right away. I guess one very maybe more specific thing would be the ability to communicate in writing in a sort of like concise and argumentative way, and in a way that gets helps them communicate with people. So just like brainstorming just now, just like getting them to like write something in the form of like a professional email or a memo or something, so they can kind of like practice that skill that they're hopefully doing, like I guess like in their career or something.
Yes, that's good, because also communications is one of those cross-cutting themes. And so when you look at the ads for jobs right now, they're showing up in, multiple different jobs. So getting them to write a professional memo is exactly one of the things that we're starting. We could do, but what level class do you have?
I'm teaching all 100 levels this semester. I'm just starting out.
Excellent. Yeah, that's an excellent assignment for that class. But now you have the tough part to develop the learning outcome. What do you think that could be?
I think students will learn to communicate orally and and will learn to communicate professionally in a written setting. I think maybe, I don't know.
Okay. All right. That's a good start. Learn to communicate professionally, right? In a professional setting. Yes. And then perhaps we could also add to it, to that diverse audience, something like that, because a lot of us are now focused on that. So that would be a good 100 level assignment to actually help students prepare. We can, thanks, Dustin. We can take another one, Alejandro.
Thank you, Denise. And that's great, Dustin. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like I was thinking very similarly, just like I was kind of starting from backwards. Like, what is the reasoning? Is that often, yeah, we want to teach students to communicate and to connect difficult concepts, for example. And so I guess I was also kind of posing that as a question. I really like your idea, Dustin, of having it be like a professional kind of writing. I think that's something I've seen I teach anthropology and environmental studies, and something that we see in my field is often like write like a policy memo or something that like a decision maker will read. So that could be kind of cool to sort of have them read more humanities anthropology type of work, but then also have, because there is a field of applied anthropology, and you could work at NOAA, for example, and become an anthropologist in that context, and you have to be able to communicate to policymakers and also write papers. But in terms of the learning outcome, yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's a challenging one as well. Like, students would be able to synthesize different kinds of concepts, or will be able to apply concepts to different sort of geographical or case concepts, contexts. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, things that come to, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead, Alejandro. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so many different things come to mind, but yeah, potentially being able